Welcome, gorgeous humans, to Project Woman TV, myself, Abby Adams. And today I am welcoming the wonderful Sarah Leigh, writer, director, and founder of Inclusivity Films. Now, I had the privilege of meeting Sarah on a private group of the women in film. And just her conversation just fired up my curiosity and my interest. So it is a pleasure to have you here, Sarah.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Abby. I appreciate the invite.
Oh, well, let's kick off this conversation.
Yeah.
So we obviously, everyone always has a conversation prior to coming on. And I said to Sarah, I'd love to know what it's been like for you as a woman in film. And with this is exactly what she's just done. Her eyebrows shot up and was it, I cannot wait to pass this story on. So I would love to hear, firstly, why you got into film. What was it a natural progression? Was it easy? And what was it like to be a woman?
Okay, I wouldn't say it was easy. I first got into the industry, it was in TV. That's how I started in TV news, actually, in a 24-hour news channel, quite a famous one in Britain. And I worked at several different ones and in international news as well, because I'd done a master's in TV journalism. Always wanted to do it. Always wanted to be in TV or film in some way. Watched film every day growing up. Like film, just my passion. I lots of 80s films, 90s, just my absolute, yeah, just loved film and just wanted a way in. But no one in my family worked in that. We're all like have very different jobs to that sort of thing. I was the first person in my family to go to uni. Still am the only person who's ever gone to uni. So it was just kind of relentless. I was very focused, knew what I wanted. I'm autistic, so I have a very okay, I know I want to do this. I'm going to go and do it. And how do I need to go about it? So yeah, started in TV. And then from there, I became an actor for 15 years. So I have very interesting stories about being a woman in that area of the industry. And then during the pandemic, like many people did, I started writing. And I think that came because I was just, I was getting a lot of the same scripts as an actor of a certain type of woman. I was doing some great stuff as well, but I then get sent scripts where it was, always playing someone who was the girlfriend, moving the man's story along rather than actually being a three-dimensional character as a woman. So, and a lot of the topics just weren't stuff that I was interested in. And I, couldn't afford to pick and choose things, but I got to a point where I was like, actually, how do I want to spend my life? Do I want to be doing work that other people have written that doesn't resonate with me? Or do I actually want to create stuff and get the stories out that I want to tell? So then that's when I launched Inclusivity Films as well. And I've now directed a couple of micro shorts, but two fuller, longer shorts, fully funded shorts. And that came about as well because my own neurodivergence, but also my son is disabled, my younger son. And I still haven't seen anyone like him represented on screen. And I want that to change because there's a whole community that we aren't serving currently. So yeah, guess that's a long answer into how
No,
to
not
where
at
I am now.
all. Not at all. I'm interested in the comment you made about being sent the same roles, which was the girlfriend always pushing the boyfriend to be in the spotlight. For any of you watching, please excuse my rather mad dog in the background. Yeah, that would be Bear. Does that happen a lot? Do you speak to many other actresses in the industry? Is that a common theme where the woman is the one pushing the man through? And I also want to bring up as well, because you got my curiosity fired up about this pay gap between female and male actors. Is this still a big thing within the industry?
I think so. In answer to the pay gap stuff, I mean, you've only got to look at, I can't even remember what the film was now, but the one where Michelle Williams and Mark Wahlberg were having to do ADR or additional dialogue recording after they'd filmed. And I think she got paid about $1,000 and he got hundreds of thousands to do the same job. There was that's the example I tend to use. I think that's accurate. There was a massive gap between them and they're both A-list stars, so even at that level it's happening. It's very hard to know because I do speak to more female actors or female identifying actors than I do men, I guess, around it. So I don't know how much. You don't really go on set and say, well, how much are you being paid, you know, but I've heard that it's still happening. I think in terms of the scripts, it's just that we need more women writing scripts. And again, like with the Creative Diversity Network, they released figures just before Christmas that said women writers in TV have gone down again, and like the percentage of women who are writing. So unless you have people writing the stories that understand, and I feel the same way about disabled people's stories need to be told authentically and by people who understand and can really fully fledge those characters. If we're getting people who don't have the same experience as us writing characters for us, it's never going to be quite the same as what the man is getting.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's dropped off? I mean, why do you think that there aren't enough women writers anyway? But to now move from a place of lack in the first instance to even less, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there are enough women writers out there. I mean, I think I surround myself with a lot of women and people who identify as female because that's just like with women in film, and you're just surrounded by people. And I know more women writers than I do male. So it's just, I think they're out there. They're just not being given the opportunities. And there are some great schemes out there, but I think like writing schemes, and they can help to develop a script, but then it's that next stage of actually being seen by commissioners that yeah, I think it needs to change from the top. And this goes with disability as well as for women, that if you haven't got people with that lived experience who are on the board or in charge, then, you know, the people making the decisions are the same people who are commissioning people that are just like them. And then, you know, it's just very hard to get out of that cycle.
So when you talk about being seen, what's the process of that? I mean, how do you get seen? How do you get in front of these people? How can women be more seen? And I mean, you brought up an institution there that supports that, but what's the process?
I think it's so hard. I don't think I have the answers really for it. I think that it is about, I'm lucky I have mentors within the industry that I feel are helping me, but it's finding those and getting those. And I was lucky to be on the Women in Film and Television mentorship scheme last year. So I was, you know, given these mentors, which is fantastic. But I think there's a lot of women who don't have that and don't have people they can go to. And again, whilst it's not reflective up higher, those women aren't going to be called in. So yeah, I really don't know what the answer is. I don't know whether it is just saying, you know, a certain percentage of what we're going to like bring into a scheme, or we're going to, you know, read this year, we're going to have at least 50% are going to be women writers. And I'm not sure that happens right now.
How does that make you feel?
It's frustrating. It's just, I think there are so many taboos, I think, that people think are taboos, which I don't, like, you know, the female experience that we don't get to see on TV. And I yeah, I guess what I'm saying is it's frustrating. I see it from being, you know, again, I have to bring it into disability because that is what, you know, I do with my work and, you know, my everyday life, is that it's just not, I feel sometimes it can be a bit of a tick box exercise. It definitely feels that way for both, for women and disability, but it's then just not being given that progression, or not having, when it comes to disability, you know, access needs not being met and all of that stuff, which, you know, they'll say we want a disabled talent, but then not putting the access stuff into place to actually, oh, actually, we can't do this. That happens like weekly. So I guess I've got a lot of frustrations. I had, just before Christmas, I had a very angry couple of weeks where I was just like, my partner said to me, "You're so angry." I was like, yeah, it just seemed to be one thing after another of not knockbacks necessarily, but actual like real discrimination within the industry, and just
Oh,
being like,
wow. Can you
and I,
elaborate on an instance of what that was?
yeah. So it's that thing. I know we spoke about this off of the interview as well, about you feel like you take some steps forward and you're getting quite far, and then you get just shoved right back. And it's a bit of a wake up call to like, wow, we have such a long way to go. Um, so I mean, there are instances, there are so many of them. I mean, this week, I can talk about personally as well, but work-wise, it was that a client had an audition, and they can't use stairs, and this company were adamant they were going to audition them upstairs. And I said, well, that can't happen, it has to be downstairs. Oh, well, we can't do that. And they were refusing to give the audition on that basis. And it was just, many things. And then another thing was support costs had been agreed and then weren't going to be fulfilled in the end, even though the client had done the job. So that was really not good. But this stuff happens weekly for us. So I should say as well, like, I co-founded a talent agency, Inclusive Talent. So, putting disabled actors and non-disabled actors, but the majority of our clients are deaf, disabled and or neurodivergent. We're putting them up for jobs. So we every day are dealing with production companies who are trying to cast our actors. But then we come up across all these different access issues. And I think I had about 3 or 4 things in that 1 week leading up to Christmas. And then another thing that I do is around equitable healthcare for children with complex health needs and disabilities, because of my son and the bad experiences we've had going into hospital with him, because of a lack of understanding and people not, meeting reasonable adjustments when we go for an appointment. So I just had, a pretty rough experience with a GP just before the holidays, where I'd taken my son. He finds it really hard to like wait for any kind of time. Sorry, I'm going slightly off tangent, but it's part of the angry stuff. And so the receptionist is always very good and calls ahead and says, oh, he's here, can he be seen? We waited about 20 minutes and we still hadn't been seen, but the doctor was coming out and calling other people to come in. And then when we did go in, she just looked at him and said, oh, I can see why you wanted him to be a priority now. I was like, okay, but you didn't make him a priority. And then she just kept looking at him saying, oh, he's awful. Isn't he awful? And I just, this sort of thing, I've had strangers say awful things to us. They come up, it happens, and it's never, I get a bit of anxiety going out, because I know that, there's generally something where the people stare or they say a comment. But for a doctor, a healthcare professional, you just expect a little better. You just expect it to be, I don't know, a bit more accessible, but a bit more understanding. And it just didn't happen. So yeah, sorry, digress completely
No,
out
that's all. But what
industry.
you're highlighting is, darling, is the biases that still fuel the actions, which is why we're still kind of a bit further back than what we need to be.
Yeah.
And it's the same in the world of the working woman and women's health. We're not picking these fights up because we want to have a fight.
Yeah.
We're picking these issues up because we desire change.
Mm-hmm.
We want change. And what I can hear from your stories is that you're a woman that sees the inconsistencies and sees where there is wrongdoing, and you're actually an actioner. You're a person that creates the action to make the change. And that's what I love about human beings. I don't necessarily see, as I've matured like a very fine wine, I don't necessarily see that we as women have to keep fighting. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that we step back and we don't do anything, but I feel now we are so acutely aware of each other as women, how we have been pitted against each other for a very long time, how this idea of trying to be more like the opposite sex has taken us further away in our relationships to other women. It's phenomenal, isn't it? And now we're the veil is lifting, and we can see more clearly, and our actions are becoming more focused, and we are more desire driven. Our passions are coming through. And so speaking of these biases gives us greater understanding as to how they are bloody everywhere. They're in everything.
And you feel like you've gotten past some of it sometimes, and then it kind of, well, it crops back up again. And I feel like I'm very lucky in the past few years. I've really been surrounded by a lot of amazing women and supported by them, and felt really supported by them. That wasn't always the case, for sure, like you say. And especially I found that in TV news, that was a really difficult environment to be in, and it didn't last very long. I mean, I'd one of the presenters, he threw a sandwich at my face, and yeah, there's some real like things,
Honestly, I mean,
I had a tape thrown at me. I don't know why people threw things at me, they just thought they could. But that, almost 20 years ago, but still it doesn't feel like that long ago for that
yeah.
stuff that's been
Well, it's
happening.
not really, is it, to be fair? But I had this conversation yesterday. I was giving a talk to women in property, and I used to work in property for a very big firm in Mayfair. And I used to work for one of the very few women within the company who was also on the board. She was a phenomenal woman, but she was known as a bitch throughout the company by all the other women, not the majority of the women. And I used to say, but she has to shout louder than all of these men here to be heard and seen, because they ignore her, they ridicule her, they make her life so bloody hard. And I saw underneath the armor at times, and that was vulnerable, that was fragile. She didn't open up that much, but when she did, you could see the impact that was having. And this is what I mean about how this belief that we have to work more like men, we have to push and we have to be better, drives that wedge between our relationships with each other, because you're unapproachable almost, because you're moving outside of your natural abilities. And someone asked me, but so how do you not work like a man? And I said, well, that's realizing that you don't work on a 24-hour clock, you're on a 28-day clock. But what does that mean? Well, it's not you cramming everything in, it's understanding where your zones of genius and power lie, so that you can keep dropping into those, so that you manage your month instead of shoving it all in a day. And they got it, but they didn't.
Right.
But it was that understanding of, oh, there is a choice.
Yeah.
I do have a choice. And I feel that this is what we are now experiencing. I have choices, but what are they? How do I get them? Who can help me with them? And this is exactly what I see that you've been creating, with the stories that I've heard. And I've spoken to other women in film about the way they've been spoken to. And it's a choice, isn't it? It's a choice to be offended. But when this is the constant conversation, like anything, it wears you down.
Yeah.
And why should you have to put up with things like that when they don't?
Yeah. I think like I mentioned, I've been very lucky to be around women and working in a way of kindness, really, and like having that on our sets. And definitely we work in an inclusive way. 50% of cast and crew at least identify as deaf, disabled and or neurodivergent. So we're working in a way that we are making it accessible for everyone that comes on set, and we put all of that stuff in place before we even get to set. And that just makes for a better environment anyway, and people being able to speak up, because there were so many times, I think particularly as an actor, you feel so replaced, like you could be replaced very easily. They'll get another actor in quite easily if you dare speak up about anything. But yeah, I had some real hideous experiences. I mean, I've been part of anonymously, I've been part of a documentary or two around the whole Me Too stuff, that that stuff that had happened to me as an actor, and just seeing that start to shift, although not completely, and that stuff still goes on. And I think it's just now, I don't know whether for me it's just that I'm no longer an actor. And I'm a bit older, I can speak up a bit more, and I just feel like I can be a bit more, that's not happening, sort of thing. It's just, yeah, and there was nowhere to go to. For me, that happened, I was assaulted in an audition, and that was about a year before the Me Too movement happened, and I had nowhere to go. I tried to go to the places that would help now, but they were so unsupportive then. It was just like, oh, well, this isn't like a production that's under our banner. The contract wouldn't be under us. So we can't help you, and no signposting anywhere. Whereas now I think if it happened, there's more outrage about it and people are, there to support, I'd hope. But it's one, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I don't do it anymore as well. And it took me a long time after that to be able to go into an audition room and having to make sure exactly who was in that room. I generally did my diligence around that, but yeah, I'm not even going to blame myself for that because I'm not to blame for it. But it was just that whole, just do I want to be in that position of vulnerability again? I'm not so sure.
So let's bring up some positives. As you said, have you
Sorry.
seen? No, but it's the way of the world, isn't it? It is. We are now moving through, which is so awesome. And I always like to look forward, but it's understanding what's happened in the past so that we don't make those same mistakes and we can make greater choices moving forward. So what's the pluses from all of this, from all of your experience? What do you see now within the film industry for women and for disabled people? What can you tell us?
I think that, well, for disabled talent, I do feel that the conversations are happening, that people are wanting to make change, and it's going to take a while, for this to become the norm. But as soon as we do have access consultants on every production from the very beginning, and we have access coordinators on set, and working in a truly inclusive way, location scouting inclusively for everything, then we're going to see change. And that stuff is happening, and there's some great conversations happening and some great things happening. So I do see positives there as well as the negatives. And as a woman, just that there's a lot of talk about imposter syndrome a lot, but recognizing what that is. And I definitely feel that women want to support women more. And there's a lot more conversations around that. Like when I first came into the industry, it wasn't spoken about at all that there was this disparity between, well, pay or anything else. It wasn't talked about not being enough women in the industry. I don't remember any of that. So the fact that we talk about it all the time now and people are outraged, would love to, maybe it's just the way my algorithm works because I follow a lot of women, but I'd love to see more men outraged about stuff and talking about it as well, and like allies in that way. And there are some. So I think, it's just, there is change happening, and it does feel so, but we are moving forward. So that is a positive.
My next question was, what do you think the men in film feel about what women are going through? Because I'm sure, like, having the understanding of women getting molested in auditions and this pay gap and all of these other, have you had conversations with men and what are their thoughts on this?
I did have an experience on an acting job, and after everything had happened, where it wasn't like, it was a member of the public actually that had harassed me, and I'd been on my own whilst everyone else had gone, which was fine. I was just finding my way back to the car, but I got in the car with male actors and said to them, oh, this just happened. And I wanted to say it, and they were both like, oh, they were both so outraged by it, and they're like, right, you need to tell the AD, you need to go and tell this person, we need to get this like sorted so this doesn't happen again. And like, wow, okay, that was like, I've never had that kind of reaction before. But people are aware of it, like whenever, not that I talk about it loads, but whenever I have done around people and men and women and however people identify, they always have a story about someone they know it's happened to. So it happens and they always know. And I think what happened before was people would stay quiet about things, especially like bigger named people, and didn't want to, that position of power, could wreck their own careers if they were to speak out about it. And there were some very powerful A-listers, that men that didn't say anything, they kept quiet about it. And I hope that would be different now, that they would speak up. And yeah, it definitely feels a lot more supportive than it did, 10 years ago.
It seems so surreal for you to say that, because when you look at actors and actresses, they look so powerful, and you would think in that creative environment that there is that freedom of speech. So I find that so perplexing, and still what a vulnerable area. Like most people feeling afraid to speak up about something so important through fear of losing their job or not getting more work. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
It is, and it comes with the NDAs and the legal side of things, and not being able to speak about things before they'd even happened. And and I think there are a lot of people that were complicit with that who worked for these companies, but it's it takes those stories to come out about these big named people, American and British and wherever, then you start seeing more people come out with stories. And yeah, it does feel strange that you expect those people to have a lot of power, but there were people, and probably maybe still are, who could kill careers.
Yeah. So if you was talking to your beautiful younger self, and she's just about to go into the TV, and she's just about to go into a career, what would you say to her?
Do you know what? I have no regrets. So I feel that everything I've done has led me to where I am today. So I wouldn't say to change anything. I would just say to follow your gut, follow your instinct, because it's always right. It's always right. And the times I haven't is when it's been not so great. So, and follow your heart, do what you love, which I kind of feel I have done anyway. As soon as, my heart isn't in something anymore, I have to leave it. It's just done. I'm quite impulsive, but I'm quite good at making those as well around, what's good for me and what's not. I think maybe my younger self needed to make them a little bit more quickly.
But when there's so much noise outside, you can't sometimes hear that in that intuitive voice, can you? And young women, I mean, when I think back to my generation, we were impressionable. We didn't realize our choices back then. It was a case of fitting in. But now that is all changing. And I'm so excited to see this. And I'm so excited to see what is happening with women in film. It's a pleasure to be part of that community where I see so many messages going on between these wonderful, intelligent, wise, so much experience, and the support and the love is just phenomenal. So I'm so excited to see where women in film go, what happens, and to see more writers, like you say, step forward and have these opportunities to be seen, because it is so important. But what I've learned along the way is that, as well as wanting to be seen, we have to be able to be seen, and that's two sides of the coin there. So, but Louise, I thank you so much for joining me on Project Woman Tea. Me and my hat, the hat that I couldn't take off because I'm just too cold. But Louise was happy with me to wear my tea cozy. So thank you, my darling. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, and I will speak to you soon. But thank you for watching, and we will be back. We'll be back as always. Cheers.